Hi, I'm Dean Humphreys. I'm a sound editor, re-recording mixer and sound supervisor.
Dean, could you tell me how your career has developed from where it started off to where you are now?
It started, I've been in the industry for 40 years. It started, my first step into the film industry was at the age of 17, and I worked at Twickenham Film Studios, literally sweeping the floor, making the coffee and the teas and posting the letters in a very sort of time-honoured and traditional sort of apprenticeship. And went through Twickenham Film Studios for 5 years, went into TV and documentaries and commercials, came out of that back into film, went and worked in America, set up a post-production company upon returning from America, sound post-production company, and have been doing that ever since.
At what point did you realise that that's what you wanted to do for a job? That you wanted to do
well, that was at the age of about 11 or 12. I was taken to a mixing studio when I was 11 or 12 by a family friend, and there was this sort of almost religious conversion. It was a strange thing that I went into this darkened room and watching these people working very precisely and very quietly over a mixing console. And I was just drawn in, and I just thought, this is exactly what I want to do.
What would you say is the best aspect of your job?
I think there are various aspects which are in equal measure joyous, and sometimes there's frustration, but the joyous and the happy and uplifting bits are the bits that you work with people that you enjoy working with, sometimes albeit that you may not necessarily be working on a great product or project. So you can take a huge amount of enjoyment out of, 3, 4, 5 week period of working with people who you enjoy working with. Equally, it's working on something that is creative. And it's that wonderful thing of, it's a bit like watching or looking at a photograph years later. And by being able to look at something or watch something you've done from years gone by, it immediately evokes these wonderful memories. And sometimes not particularly wonderful memories. But overall, it's been able to take you back to a period of time, and out of that you remember so many things. And it's a collaborative process, and it's challenging, and it's artistic, and it's creative, and it's just great fun.
So flipping that question on its head, what are the worst aspects of having to do ADR, sound design, re-recording, things like that?
Well, in terms of, they all have their own challenges, and I think often it's the people who present the problem. So if you are delivered bad ADR, or you're having a bad time in the mixing studio, or that there's a problem with the Foley, more often than not, it is because the person that is overseeing or supervising, or the director or the producer, they say that the head fish rots from the head downwards. And I think throughout all film and TV crews, if you have a harmonious crew, it's because the director and the producer at the top are easy to work with. Conversely, if it's a troubled production, it often, not always, but often is largely to do with the people from the top. So ADR and the technicalities and the problems that you encounter aren't really, they're mostly solvable technologically. The biggest headaches are dealing with people who are never happy, or getting them to a point where they're happy.
So, Dean, what happens in a cross-section of a typical working week, if there is such a thing? Do you do Monday morning, do the admin, sort out the accounts, sort out meetings, stuff like that, then Tuesday in the studio, etc., etc.? If you did have a typical working week, what would be a rough cross-section of it?
Well, if I'm in editing mode, obviously the process before the mixing, ordinarily, so for instance, if I'm doing, say, the dialogue editing, the production dialogue editing, that will ordinarily take about 6, 7, 8 weeks to do in combination. So you would go in on a Monday morning, and you start at about 8:30, 9 o'clock. You're looking at about a 9, 10-hour day, and that is the norm, Monday to Friday. Now, it all depends on schedules, but for the first 4 or 5 weeks, it tends to be quite relaxed. Now, because the mix is looming and they've now re-edited the picture for the umpteenth time, and you now have to reconform everything, that's when the pressure on sound editing happens. So that you are prepared for the fact that you know the next 2-3 weeks you're going to be working 7 days a week and long hours, because the mix and the deadline for meeting the mix schedule is absolute. That is not a movable feast. So whatever it takes to get all your dialogue, your Foley, your sound design, your atmosphere, your effects to the mixing studio, you just work to that point and get it done. Then, if I'm in mixing mode, that is, again, it's a Monday to Friday job initially. Now here, the pressure is greater because in terms of cost, you know, a mixing studio is on average £500, £600 per hour. So it's that kind of money. So the producer wants you to be there on time. Obviously, punctuality is a big key issue in the industry. And even more so in a mixing studio, where every minute that goes by is costing the producer, you know, £5 or £6 more. And so that's the amalgamation of all the various sound elements, the dialogue, the Foley, the effects, the music. And out of that, you have a lot of anxiety because people are coming in. Will their Foley, their sound design, their sound effects, their ADR editing be critiqued? And will it be ripped to shreds? Now you have a difficult director who you have to get on side. So initially at the beginning, it's a complex but subtle process that's going on to keep everybody happy. And much of my role initially is almost like that of a counsellor. So you're just trying to set up the arena just to make sure that everybody's happy and their anxieties are reduced so it's more conducive to working harmoniously.
So what would you say, Dean, has been your career highlight to date? I know you've had quite an interesting career, worked on some incredible projects. Are there any particular films or TV shows or moments with a certain crew that really stand out of your kind of top 3 kind of moments?
Well, in terms of memories, both good and bad, we could be here genuinely for 2 hours, and there's a whole host of stories, and some absurd ones, and I'll be fairly discreet. But there have been moments of absolute absurdity and madness, which have been fantastic to be a part of. And again, it's a wonderful memory, and I've seen well-known Hollywood actors have moments of meltdowns that, if I'd been able to film it, would probably have made me a lot of money in the future. It was sort of a form of pension by being able to sell it on. The highlights in terms of from a sound point of view, I suppose, was the Polanski film I did called The Pianist. So from a sound point of view, that was the closest I got to something that I'm happy with, but one is never entirely happy. It's just a given thing that if you're entirely happy with your work, then get out, because it's something that should always be evolving. The Pianist was from a sound point of view, but then, as I said earlier, it's a combination of many other things, people you enjoy working with. So working with a Polanski, if I had to sit in front of a screen and we had no sound to mix for 6 weeks, just working with the man alone is recompense. It's a joy. Equally so, you can work on wonderful projects with directors that don't particularly inspire you. You can work on bad projects where you enjoy working with people. So it really is an amalgamation of, yes, of course, sound is my area of expertise, but it's not just the sound that is the thing that sort of galvanizes me or interests me. It's the whole host of other things, and understanding the new technology changes. And on each film, you know, maybe introducing a new piece of hardware or software or trying out ideas. And then equally being able to look back at something and reflect and say, that I thought worked really well, but in future, I think that particular way I went about that scene or that film, I need to adapt it and change it. So it is a constantly evolving arena.
So what are your kind of professional aspirations for the future then, Dean? What would you like to do next in your career?
Well, I've been fortunate because years ago when I first started out, I was just working in the world of film, and the industry has morphed very much into being able to work in film and TV and games and documentaries. So from that point of view, I found it uplifting in some ways, that one isn't just confined to one particular area. And I think with this technology, it's democratized everything, that you can 1 minute be working in games or documentaries or viral stuff or stuff from YouTube. I think that's been the beauty. So I'm constantly looking to keep moving into different areas. So the next thing I'm doing is a very, very short little film, a 10-minute short film. Then I'm going to be doing a TV series, or I hope to be doing a TV series that comes up in about 3 or 4 months' time. And then later on in the year, a movie. And I like the ability to go between various things. It keeps me fresh and alert. And I like also sometimes, especially with TV and sometimes short films, you have to work very quickly. And I like the discipline of having to work quickly at times. I wouldn't want to do that all the time, but I enjoy working under pressure. And I think it also brings a certain energy, and often a creative energy, that you ordinarily don't get when you're given too much time on something.
What advice would you have for kind of aspiring students? So if you met, I don't know, say an 18, 19, 20-year-old version of yourself, what kind of seeds and pearls of wisdom would you pass on to someone of that age trying to get into the film and creative industries, working on sound projects for ADR, mixing, etc.?
I think it's absolutely essential that students don't get lost in the technology. It is a mere aside. So films were being made 50, 60, 70 years ago, well before digital technology. They're just as worthy, just as creative, just as interesting. So yes, it will be an essential part of you understanding the technology when you go and work at a studio or a facility or a broadcast truck or whoever. But don't think that that is the thing that's going to get you the job. The most important factor, I think, in anybody's career at the beginning is your enthusiasm, allied to your ability to be able to ride the punches, because sometimes they're incoming. If you have a short fuse, don't go into the industry. The most important thing to begin with is timekeeping. And it sounds old-fashioned, it sounds fogey-ish, and people say, yeah, but unleash me on the artistic, creative side, because that's what I want to do. The industry in some ways is quite draconian. It's severe at times. If you don't turn up on time, and especially at the beginning, your apprenticeship, if you're 18, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, whatever, and you go and work for a facility or a studio or a company, timekeeping is imperative, because they cannot afford to have people wandering in a little bit late. Because if the director or producer is there, the people who are paying your wages, if you're not there to make them the teas and the coffees and load the drives and do the relatively menial chores, then your career is not going to advance. It is as simple as that. It is reliant upon, it's almost a bit like maybe saying boot camp is too severe. But initially in your career, if you're a bit flaky with timekeeping, the industry will slowly ease you out. And you have to be user-friendly. You have to be proactive. You have to be reactive. And in anybody's career, and there are moments, especially at the beginning, when you will be dealt with sometimes rather severely or harshly by the client, the producer, the director, because you are mere cannon fodder. And if you overreact, and if you take umbrage at everything, and you find the need to tell people where to get off, your career is going to be short-lived. You sometimes have to smile inanely like an idiot, and just agree with them, albeit that inwardly you're thinking, I completely disagree with you. But they're paying your wages, and it's not a question of having to sell yourself and be a doormat, but it's imperative you are a user, you are user-friendly, you are a team player. And sometimes you have to sacrifice your creative and artistic vision that you have, that you've had it fixed in your mind for weeks, so you want this to work like that. If the director wants it upside down or the reverse, give it to them with a smile on your face. And there's too many people's careers have ended on a principle of, that their vision, wasn't realised by the idiot director or producer.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much, Dean. That's
pleasure.
That's my final question. Great.
Pleasure.
Excellent.